The Mice and Men essay question in the lit paper should take you 50 minutes to complete. It's a good idea to start with this question and get it out of the way. You should spend 50 minutes on the whole question, but 10 minutes of that time should be spent planning. You'll be asked a question such as, why is friendship significant in Mice and Men? Or explore the significance of Lenny as a character in Mice and Men. And when you're thinking about that question, you need to be thinking about importance. Why is that theme or why is that character important? And you can think about what it has an impact on. Who does it affect in terms of characters? Does the plot change because of this theme or because of this character? Where can you see it in the book? Where do you need to talk about? And how is it important? In this question, you need to keep referring constantly to context. And context is included in the next couple of slides. Things like the Great Depression, what was happening historically, what was happening to farmers in terms of the Dust Bowl, what was happening culturally and socially with the migrant workers and how they had to constantly move around to find work, the idea of the American dream, racism, and women. You have all this on a handout anyway, but if you're not sure about different parts of this context, you need to go back through the video, pause the slide, and make sure that you understand the context so that you can link it in easily to your essay. This example question says, in what ways is Lenny significant in the novel? And this candidate has done a plan just using bullet points to start with. You can plan with bullet points, you could plan with the paragraphs that you want to include, or you could do a mind map or a spider diagram, whatever works best for you. They've thought about talking about Lenny's friendship with George and how that's unusual for itinerant migrant workers at the time. They've thought about the context of there being little equality for disabled people and the fact that the American dream was something that was relevant to George and Lenny and the dream that they had of owning their own ranch. His friendship, the fact that he's loyal to George, and how the relationship between George and Lenny is like a father-son relationship, and his innocence compared to the other men. It's a good idea to think, if you get a question about character and you do get a choice of 2 questions and you're just going to answer one, is what themes does the character link to? So if you're thinking about Lenny, he could link into the theme of friendship, he could link into the theme of violence, and through thinking about the themes, then you'll be able to think about where you can see that example in the novel and what that tells you about his importance. This candidate talks about how Lenny is crucially important as he is vital to the key themes of friendship and dreams. So they're the themes that he's chosen to link to this character. One of the first things the reader notices about Lenny is his relationship with George. Lenny is very close to George, he looks up to him, and George is a father figure to Lenny. He's then put a quote in there to prove this point. This is suggested by the way Lenny imitated George exactly, looked over to George to see whether he had it just right. Like a son does to a father, Lenny wants to be like George and also looks to him for approval. Similarly, even though Lenny is physically more imposing, he feels he needs George for protection. Don't let him sock me, George. This shows he needs and relies on George the same way a small child does to their parent. You can see that the candidate is picking out quotations from the start of the novel. This bit about imitating George is before they even get to the ranch, where they're camping out for the evening. And where he's talking about the don't let him sock me, George, where he needs George for protection, that refers to the fight scene with Curly. So it's a good idea to have lots of places in the novel that you can go to quite easily to find your quotes. The relationship between George and Lenny not only symbolises the theme of friendship, but contrasts with that of loneliness. As migrant workers, George and Lenny have to move from place to place to find work. For most itinerant workers, this means they have little chance of having a lasting friendship and are consequently lonely. However, as George and Lenny have each other, they're not lonely, as pointed out by George. The candidate keeps referring to context and not just a bolt-on paragraph. They keep linking it in to what the question is asking them about Lenny. Another noticeable thing about Lenny is that he's mentally disabled. Steinbeck uses this as a sign of when the book is set, as at that time disabled people had less equality than they do now. This is suggested by the way George doesn't want Lenny to say anything when they arrive at the ranch, for fear that they won't get the job. You weren't going to say a word. If he finds out what a crazy bastard you are, we won't get no job. Another way in which Lenny is significant about Lenny is his innocence. This is linked to Lenny's place in society and his relationship with George, as it is because he is childlike. Slim first notices his innocence and lack of malice when he says, "I can see Lenny ain't a bit mean." Although Lenny kills mice, a puppy, and Curly's wife, it's still clear that he has no malice, as after killing the puppy he says, "Why'd you got to get killed?" as blaming the puppy instead of himself shows that he feels he is not to blame, and that he has no power of understanding his own strength. The candidate has then linked Lenny into the theme of the American dream. As with George, he shares a hope of owning their own ranch. He believes completely that the dream will come true and is always keen to hear of it. "Come on, George, tell me, please, George, like you done before." His repetition in the above quote gives the impression that he is desperately pleading and therefore enthusiastic. He also never doubts the dream. How long is it going to be? The use of when instead of if implies that he is certain it will happen. So this candidate is exploring language, continuing to really analyse the quotes that they've chosen. Overall, Lenny is central to the themes and plot of Mice and Men. Now, the conclusion is slightly weak in comparison to the rest of their essay. In your conclusion, you can talk about how the character or how the theme is significant, why they're significant, and sum up what you said in the rest of the essay. You could also think about what message Steinbeck was trying to give the reader. What was his intentions as a writer? What did he want people to go away thinking? As another example of a question, why is Curly a significant character? And just as an example of what you need to think about, what themes does Curly link to? How does he link into context? What part of the novel does he appear in? You should all have example questions in the pack that I gave you, and it's a good idea to be planning how you would answer different questions. Spend 10 minutes just thinking of your ideas, put them into some kind of essay plan and working through it like that. For the essay, you're going to need a strong introduction where you explain how the character links to key themes or how the themes are shown by events or by characters. In the main body of your essay, you're aiming for at least 4 paragraphs, perhaps more if you can in the time, exploring key themes, characters, events and ideas in detail. And for each paragraph, you should attempt to try and link in the context where you can and not just have it a bolt-on paragraph at the beginning of the essay. In the conclusion, sum up the main message that Steinbeck wanted the reader to think about. When you're trying to develop your answer so that you can do a more detailed and thorough explanation, you need to think about which parts of the 7 stages would be useful to use. You might want to explore language. You might want to give an alternative interpretation. You might want to say what the writer was intending to do or what the effect is on the reader. And all of those stages are different ways of making your explanation as thorough and as detailed as possible.